Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi everyone, my name is Adibah Shofwah from English Education Department, Class 5A. In this video, I want to explain the material about the nature of inquiry setting the field. First of all, I want to say thanks to our lecturer, Mr. Nuardi, MET, as a lecturer in Research and Development in ELT course. Okay, this is the content that I want to explain in this video, from the first, the search for truth, until the methods and methodology. Okay, the first content is the search for truth. To find a solution in the problems, we can be classified into the three broad categories. The first is experience, the second is reasoning, and the third is research. And in our endeavors to come to terms with the problems of day-to-day living, we are heavily dependent of experience and authority. It must be remembered that as tool for uncovering ultimate truth, they have decided the limitation. So, this is the difference of laypeople with scientists. The first is laypeople base them on haphazard events and use them in a loose and uncritical manner, while in scientists construct their theories carefully and systematically. The second, laypeople generally make no attempt to control any extraneous source of influence when trying to explain an occurrence, while in scientists, on the other hand, only too conscious of the multiplicity of causes for a given occurrence, resort to deviate techniques and procedures to isolate and test the effect of one or more of the alleged cause. And the third is laypeople's concerns with such relationships are loose, unsystematic, and uncontrolled. In scientists, however, display a much more serious professional concern with relationship, and only as a result of rigorous experimentation will they postulate a relationship between two phenomena. And to comprehend the world around, we use three types of reasoning. The first is deductive reasoning, the second is inductive reasoning, and the third is the combined inductive-deductive approach. True is research, and research is true. That has defined by Kerlinger in 1970 as the systematic, controlled, empirical, and critical investigation of hypothetical propositions about the presumed relation among natural phenomena. And research has three characteristics. The first is research is systematic and controlled. The second is research is empirical. And the third is research is self-correcting. And the second concept is two conception of social reality. This is a scheme for analyzing assumptions about the nature of social science, from the subjectivist approach to social science and the objectivist approach to social science, with ontology, epistemology, human nature, and methodology. Each of the two perspectives on the study of human behavior outlined above has profound implications for research in classrooms and schools, are influenced by the viewpoint held. And next content is positivism. Back in 1979, is the first thinker to use the word for a philosophical position. According to Dunchan in 1968, the term positivism is used by philosophers and social scientists. A residual meaning is always present, and this derives from an acceptance of natural science as the paradigm of human knowledge. The fourth content is the assumptions and nature of science. There are four assumptions from sciences. The first is determinism, empiricism, parsimony, and generality. First, determinism means simply that events have causes, and empiricism means that which is verifiable by observation and direct experience, and evidence, data yielding proof or strong confirmation in probability terms of a theory or a hypothesis in a research setting. And in Empiricism by Molly in 1978 identifies 5 steps in the process of empirical science. The first, experience, the second, classification, the third is quantification, and the fourth is discovery of relationship, and the five or the last is approximation to the truth. And parsimony. Parsimony is the basic idea that phenomena should be explained in the most economical way possible. And generality is played an important part in both the deductive and inductive methods of reasoning. So what is science? Science is from the word static and dynamic. From the two concepts in static and dynamic, we can conclude science is an accumulated body of findings, the emphasis being chiefly on the present state of knowledge and adding to it. And according to professional scientists, said science is seen as a way of comprehending the world, as a means of explanation and understanding of prediction and control. For them, the ultimate aim of science is theory. So, what is theory? Theory is a set of concepts, definitions, and propositions that present a systematic view of phenomena by specifying relations among variables with the purpose of explaining and predicting the phenomena. There are several different types of theory. The first grand theory, the second identifies empirical theories, and the last is critical theory. And this is the characteristic of an effective empirical theory. There are 9 of characteristics of effective empirical theory. So, from the 9 Ds, theory implies the use of concepts, systems, models, structures, beliefs, and ideas, hypotheses, or theories in order to make statements about particular types of action, event, or activities so as to make analysis of their cause, consequence, and process. And the fifth content is the tools of science. The tool of science, there are concept and hypothesis. Concept. Concept is expressed generalization from particulars, anger, achievement, alienation, velocity, intelligence, and democracy. And collectively, these concepts form part of their wider meaning system which permit them to give account of their reality, accounts which are rooted and validated in their direct experience of everyday life. So, considering scientific concepts, the first is do not exist independently. They are indeed our inventions, enabling us to acquire some understanding, at least, of the apparent cause of nature. And the second is they are limited in number and in this way contrast with the infinite number of phenomena they are required to explain. A second tool of great importance to the scientist is hypothesis. Hypothesis is defined by Kerlinger in 1970 as a conjectural statement of the relation between two or more variables or an educated guess. And to can get good hypothesis, we must have two criteria. The first hypothesis are statements about the relation between variables, and the second hypothesis carry clear implication for testing the state relation. For reason for the importance of hypothesis as tool of research, the first is organize the effort of researchers. The second is working instrument of theory. They can be deduced from theory or from other hypotheses. The third can be tested empirically or experimentally, thus resulting in confirmation or rejection. The fourth is always the possibility that a hypothesis unsupported and established may become a law. And the five is hypotheses are powerful tools for the advancement of knowledge. The next concept is the scientific method. According to Kauf and Paine in 1979, their statement, a scientific approach necessarily involves standards and procedures for demonstrating the empirical warrants of its findings, showing the match or fit between its statement and what is happening or has happened in the world. So there is 8-stage model of the scientific method. Stage first is hypothesis, hunch and guess. Stage 2 is experiment and design it. Is sample taken, like variable isolate. Stage 3 is correlation observed. Stage 4 is hypothesis formed to explain regularities. Stage 5 is explanation and prediction test. Stage 6 is laws developed or disconfirmation or hypothesis rejected. Stage 7 generalization made. Stage 8 is new theories. Next content is criticism of positivism and the scientific methods. From Rozak, Science, in its pursuit of objectivity, is a form of alienation from our true self and from nature. And Hamdan Turner concludes that the social science view of human beings is biased in that it is conservative and ignores important qualities. From Warnock, anyone who is committed to science or to rule-governed morality is benighted and needs to be rescued from his state of darkness. So, finally, the finding of positivistic social science are often said to be so banal and trivial that they are of little consequence to those for who they are intended. The next content is alternative to positivistic social science, naturalistic approach. Although the opponents of positivism within social science itself subscribe to a variety of schools of thought, each with its own subtly different epistemological viewpoint, they are united by their common rejection of the belief that human behavior is governed by general, universal laws and characterized by underlying regularities. The next concept is a question of terminology, the normative and interpretive paradigma. The terms in question are normative and interpretive. First is the normative paradigma or model contains is two major orienting ideas from Douglas in 1978. The first is that human behavior is essentially rule-governed, and second, that it should be investigated by the methods of natural science. And for the interpretive paradigma, in contrast to its normative counterpart, is characterized by a concern for the individual. Two further differences between the two paradigma may be identified at this stage. The first is concern the concept of behavior and action, and the second is different conception of theory. As regard theory, normative researchers try to devise general theories of human behavior and to validate them through the use of increasingly complex research methodologies which, some believe, push them further and further from the experience and understanding of the everyday world and into a world of abstraction. So, what of the interpretive researchers? They begin with individuals and set out to understand their interpretation of the world around them. And theory is emergent and must arise from particular situation. It should be grounded in data generated by research act. And the data thus yielded will include the meaning and purpose of those people who are their source. The next content is Phenomenology, ethnomethodology, and symbolic interactionism. In here, we focus on three significant traditions in this style of research: phenomenology, ethnomethodology, and symbolic interactionism. Phenomenology is a theoretical point of view that advocates the study of direct experience taken at face value. And ethnomethodology is concerned with the world of everyday life. And next is characteristic. Instead of focusing on the individual then and his or her personality characteristic or on how the social structure or social situation cause individual behavior and activities taking place between the people. So this can be include the interaction, the characteristic. This is in here the way they fit naturally to the kind of concentrate action found in classroom and schools, and the analyzing and interpreting the situation. Next content is criticism of the naturalistic and interpretive approach. From according to Argyle in 1978, question whether if carefully controlled interviews such as those used in social surveys are inaccurate, then the less controlled interviews carry even greater risks of inaccuracy. And from later in 1994, the danger of interactionist and interpretive approach is their relative neglect of the power of external structural forces to shape behavior and events. The next content is critical theory and critical educational research. An emerging approach to educational research is the paradigm of critical educational research. Morrison in 1995 suggests that critical theory, because it has a practical intent to transform and empower, can and should be examined and perhaps tested empirically. And critical theory, a theory that strives to improve practical living, runs the risk of becoming merely contemplative. And next content is criticism of approaches from critical theory. More fundamental to a critique of this approach is the view that critical theory has a deliberate political agenda, and that the task of researchers is not to be an ideologue or to have an agenda, but to be dispassionate, disinterested, and objective, by Morrison in 1995. Next content is critical theory and curriculum research. Research method and curriculum. Research method is the tenets of critical theory suggest their own substantive fields of inquiry and their own methods. And curriculum is control and controllable, or their predetermined, uniform, predictable, and largely behaviorist it outcome all elements of the positive mentality that critical theory eschews. We must remember not all knowledge can be included in the curriculum. The study of the sociology of knowledge is the curriculum should be both subject to ideology critique and itself promote ideology critique in the students. So, developing students and societal empowerment finds in expression in emancipatory interest and critical pedagogy by Habermas in 1972. So, critical pedagogy. Critical pedagogy is educator must work with on the life experience that students bring to the pedagogical encounter rather than imposing a dominatory curriculum that reproduce social inequality. And next content is a summary of the three paradigma, differing approach to the study of behavior. This is, as you can see in the picture, they are different from normative, interpretive, and the critical in behavior. Of a summary of the three paradigma, as you can see. Next content is the emerging paradigm of complexity theory. Complexity theory looks at the world in ways which break with simple cause and effect models, linear predictability, and a dissection approach to understanding phenomena, replacing them with organic, nonlinear, and holistic approach. So, complexity theory is to atomize phenomena into a restricted number of variables and then to focus only on certain factors is to miss the necessary dynamic interaction of several parts. And complexity theory is the need for case study methodology, action research, and participatory by forms of research premised in many ways on interactionist qualitative account. So the key terms on this topic is feedback, recursion, emergence, and connectedness and self-organization. And next content is feminist research. Feminist research is described in terms of its purpose of knowledge about women's life, advocacy for women, analysis of gender oppression, and transformation of society. Feminist critiques of social science research are reviewed in relation to the development of methodological and epistemological position. Having interviewers and interviewees of the same racial and ethnic background does not mean that non-hierarchical relationship will still not be present. They also report that the categories of insider and outsider were much more fuzzy than exclusive. Researchers are both subject and object, and thus being researched are both observed and observers. And next content is research and evaluation. So one can detect a trend in educational research towards more evaluative research, where, for example, a researcher's task is to evaluate the effectiveness of the implementation of given policies and projects. So evaluative research is the problem of trying to identify difference between evaluation and research is compound because not only do they share several of the same methodological characteristics, but also one branch of research. So, evaluation is research method to shed light on a problem of action. So, both researchers and evaluators pose questions and hypotheses, select samples, manipulate and measure variables, compute statistic and data, and state conclusion. Characteristic evaluation is being short-term, taking project goals as given and supporting their realization, giving undue weight to the perception of program participants who are responsible for the successful development and implementation of the program, as a result tending to over-report change. And our guest in 1993 feel that a researcher needs to be able to meet the sponsor's requirements for evaluation while also generating research data. And next content is research, politics, and policy making. The preceding discussion has suggested that there is an inescapable political dimension to educational research, both in the macro and micro political sense. Macro political sense, this manifests itself in funding arrangement where awards are made provided that the research is policy related. And research can be brought into the service of wider educational purpose, the politics of a local education authority, or indeed the politics of government agency. Educational research is politics intertwined, and politics intertwined is educational research. Research is generates a range of different types of knowledge, concept, proposition, explanation, theories, strategies, evidence, and methodologies. And research design is strives to address a complex social reality. There is a significant tension between researchers and policymakers, different and often conflicting interests, agendas, audience, timescales, terminology, and concern for topicality, and implication for research styles. And next content is methods and methodology. Methods is range of approaches used in educational research to gather data which are to be used as a basis for inference and interpretation, for explanation and prediction. And methodology is to help us to understand in the broadest possible terms not the products of scientific inquiry but the process itself. The technique of associates is questions, recording measurement, describing phenomena, and performing experiment. Interpretive paradigma until participant observation, role playing, non-directive, interviewing, episodes, and account. So method is referred to techniques and procedures used in the process of data gathering, while methodology is to describe approaches to kind and paradigma of research. So the particular value of scientific research in education is that it will enable educators to develop the kind of sound knowledge base that characterizes other professions and disciplines, and one that will ensure education a maturity and sense of progress it at present lacks. I think that's all for my explanation in this video. Thank you for watching. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.